So, welcome to More Than Sunday, the podcast that aims to help you on your journey of discipleship, not just on Sundays, but on every other day of the week as well. You're listening to episode 6 with me, Eve Powers, and my friend and colleague, Hannah Malcolm. Can you believe it? We're halfway through our year of discipleship already.
We are, and we are so pleased to hear about some of the great groups and discipleship work that has been going on across the diocese.
We absolutely love hearing about what you've been up to, so don't forget to keep using the hashtag MoreThanSunday and sharing your activities and insights. Our theme this month is waiting, not a strong suit of mine, I'm not going to lie.
In this season of Advent, we are going to consider how waiting and patience more generally can benefit our lives and our relationship with God.
So, here to discuss this with us are two wonderful guests. Marie Patterson, Church Warden at Sacred Trinity Salford and Director of Catherine House Spirituality Centre, and Bishop Mark Davis, the Bishop of Middleton. Welcome both of you. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll start, as we always do, by asking you both, what does being a disciple mean to you? Bishop Mark, can we start with you?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. It's great to be here at this very special time as we look forward to the joys of Christmas, but also savour the continuing joy of this Advent journey. So discipleship, I think that's one of those great buzzwords at the moment, isn't it? And for me, really, I think it's about friendship. At the heart of the Christian faith, for me, as I seek to live it out day by day, isn't primarily a set of rules and regulations, do's and don'ts, creeds, dogmas. Yes, we have all of those, and they're very, very important. Of course they are. But at the heart of everything for me is a living person. Jesus Christ is alive, and he calls us to be friends and disciples. And for me, that's what it's about, a living relationship with a living person who has conquered death and who will come again. Now we're preparing to celebrate his birth at Bethlehem at Christmas, but he will come again in glory at the end of time and gather up all things. So for me, I think it's about friendship, about developing in that, sometimes very, very, very conscious of the ways I've failed the best of friends, Jesus Christ, but also that he's ever merciful, welcoming home, embracing with warmth and love and mercy, friend above all friends, really. And I think for me that's discipleship, living it out each and every day, each and every turn of the journey, that he's there with us, waiting for us, waiting with us, waiting in us. And in lots of ways seeking to be, as I see this lived out across the diocese wonderfully, as Christians being the love of Jesus in action. Time and time again, transforming, bearers of hope that changes situations, changes individuals' lives, changes the lives of communities. For me, that's some of what discipleship is.
That's beautiful. And Marie, what do you think of as discipleship in your life?
Well, I sort of understand what it is, and when I look at what it is, I think, well, it's about being on a faith journey, isn't it? It's about that everyday living out the gospel. And a lot of what I do day to day is accompanying other people on that faith journey as well. You would look at it and say, oh, that's discipleship, that is, helping people engage with the Bible, helping people engage with prayer. But I don't find discipleship a particularly helpful word. When you sent me these notes, I was a little bit, discipleship. It's very buzzwordy, like Bishop Mark was saying. I feel like it's robust and masculine and not a lot to do with what I do.
Is there a word that for you would be a better word for what would encapsulate what it means for you to be on that faith journey? You don't have to have one. I'm just curious to see if there are other words or ideas that come to mind.
Maybe I should get one. But thinking about faith journey is helpful, I think. Because it's not about like, oh, well, I've become a Christian now. Made it.
Yeah, done.
And I think when we talk about discipleship, we're talking about helping people deepen their faith and go forward in it.
Right, it's that thing where we confuse convert with disciple, that Jesus called us to make disciples and not converts. But I think sometimes we treat that as like a making converts thing. So maybe we're reducing discipleship sometimes in our language to just being about telling people about Jesus and showing them Jesus, and that's it. But that journey element is really important as well.
I think when I was going around the diocese, I was making the video to launch More Than Sunday, and I went round asking people, what does being a disciple mean to you? And actually, I ended up wording it differently as we went round, and I started saying, how is it that you live out your faith every day? And I found that a much more practical way of getting people to tell me how they were being a disciple. I don't think they necessarily always worded it as, I'm a disciple by doing such and such. But actually, it was how they chose to live out what they believed in their day-to-day life. And I found that quite a useful way of describing it.
I think that's helpful.
So then if we're coming to this time of the year, and one of the ways we've tried to vaguely shape this year of discipleship is a little bit liturgically, just to touch on the
just a tiny
bit of picking up some of those themes. And we're in this month of Advent. And I'm curious then, we've come to this theme of waiting. What has the role of waiting been, or patience more generally been, in your discipleship journey or in your faith journey? And has that been positive? Has it been frustrating? Are there elements of the ways that has shaped you in your faith journey? We come to Bishop Mark again first on that.
I think that's it's an interesting question, I think, not least of all in this Advent season. And I think in my own response, I'm conscious sometimes of a sort of two-level response to Advent. Either, Advent has to be very, very rigorous and not a hint of Christmas, throughout until Christmas Eve and all of that, and banishing any thought of carols before midnight mass or down with the trees and all of that kind of stuff, which really I don't think gets me very far. I'm sure it might get other people a lot further, but it doesn't help me very much. And so really I think it's about living at two levels. Yes, entering fully into what for me is one of the most beautiful seasons of the Christian year in Advent, with its amazingly beautiful liturgical themes, its fantastic music and hymnody and liturgy and all of that, fantastic, and it's so enriching for us in our prayer and worship and all of that. But also around us is the real world into which Jesus was born. And for them, Christmas starts about the 30th of October. And certainly by Advent Sunday, they're well into Christmas. And interestingly, by Christmas night, the world by and large has finished with Christmas, just as the church has begun with it. So we have to live with all that complexity, but we have to live in the world that is real. The Diocese of Manchester as it really is, the communities as they really are. Jesus came to the real world. It's not make-believe. It's not sort of fairyland, and all that kind of stuff. It's the real world into which Jesus was born, and into which he sends us as disciples, to make disciples. So, for me, the theme of waiting, obviously for Advent, but the theme of waiting in my life as a Christian disciple, in my ministry as a priest and a bishop in the Church of God, great themes. The words Church of England and quickly rarely go together. So there's quite a bit of waiting.
This is true.
This is very true, I tell you. So there's lots of waiting, lots of process, lots of wondering. And sometimes that's incredibly frustrating, but there are other times when I'm so grateful for that, because we need space to stop and think and ponder and rethink and ask and have conversation and search. And you can't do that with a knee-jerk reaction. You can't do that. I can't do that in a sort of 24/7 instant response kind of world that I'm afraid sometimes we've created.
So beyond then there's a big structural waiting then, isn't there, that we do? Are there ways that you've also found it to be a process of learning how to wait in your own relationship with God, as well as the relationships we have with other people within the church and outside of it? How has that shaped your discipleship?
I think if going back to that theme of friendship, as with all friendships, they grow and they develop and they change, don't they? And I think when you've got a really good friend, for me, a hallmark of that is when I'm happy simply to sit in someone's company without having desperately to think about the next thing to say or the next thing to entertain them with. And so actually in my own prayer, making space for silence, simply to be in the presence of the one who knows me and loves me and comes to me in my waiting, and the one to whom I offer my waiting, my stillness, my incompleteness, my brokenness, the longings of my heart, and all of that meets in a beautiful place of silence and stillness.
I don't think I've ever put the waiting and the friendship together before. That's really profound and quite challenging, I think. Marie, can we come to you? How has waiting shaped your discipleship journey or your faith journey?
I'm not very good at waiting. My little godson's coming to see me this weekend, and he woke up today ready to set off today, and it's not till tomorrow, and his mum had to say 1 more sleeps. and I don't want to do, I'm like that. I don't want any more sleeps. I want the exciting thing now. I'm really not very good at waiting. But when I look back, on my landscape of faith, you can look back and say, oh, that was a real waiting time. I didn't grow up in the Anglican Church. I've had a very sort of ecumenical journey. I'm a sort of accidental Anglican.
Aren't we all in some way?
It's sort of because it was there. But when I think about that time where I couldn't find a church, and I was still a Christian, I was doing things as part of my Christian journey, but I didn't have a regular community to worship with. And when I found the church I worship with now, I used to go past it on a Monday night on my way to knit club, and I used to look at it and think, oh, I'd like to go, but what if it's terrible and it breaks my heart? That the idea of going was almost as good as actually going, and I didn't want to go and then be disappointed. And I went one Easter Sunday. I got to the stage where I was just like, I can't not celebrate this feast with other people, and it felt like coming home. And I didn't know that I was waiting, but having found the thing that I was waiting for, I appreciate that I had that time to need it and know that I needed it.
It's making me, both of your stories are making me think a little bit about, there's a theologian called Kosuke Koyama, and he talks about the 3 mile an hour God. And he talks about Jesus coming as a human and Jesus walking at human speed. And that's how Jesus got around. And so Jesus was walking 3 miles an hour. And the question then is, well, are you walking faster than Jesus? And in which case, who are you following anymore? And I found that really helpful to think about my own rushing constantly and wanting to have a plan and know what's coming next. The idea that then I'm just rushing ahead of the 3 mile an hour God. Who is walking at human speed and is inviting me to walk at human speed too.
I was thinking about slowing our pace in the world that we all are living in now. And even in my role as the digital officer at the diocese, I am encouraging people out onto this digital platform with good intentions, I hasten to add, about trying to get our church's messages out there to the parts of the community that wouldn't come through our church doors. I find there's a sort of a conflict there with what the lifestyle I would rather live, which is a quieter, more peaceful, and I do find that a conflict in the work that I have been brought in to do. And I hope that people, through the courses that I offer, can find a sort of balance with being online and being offline, and actually finding a structure to that. It's much healthier to be online for a small portion of the day and then to come off again, and not to spend all of our time trying to answer emails straight away. I have worked in environments before where people expect an answer to an email at the weekend, at night time. Whenever they've sent the email, that's when they want the response. So I do think we're all facing this challenge, this whole life challenge of trying to find peace and time and space. For me personally, the one kind of bit of space that I find in my church life is evensong, just to get to sit there and that rhythm and that routine of evensong, where I know it's Magnificat Nunc Dimittis responses. I just find it so peaceful, and I know there's probably an app for it, but I find it a lot more reflective, and I find it a much better space to be around other people to find my peace and quiet than to be with my headphones in on the train.
I think it's that shift in mindset, isn't it, where we start to think about waiting or patience as a discipline, right? So if we've got that same root word as discipleship, if waiting and patience are a discipline, then we can stop punishing ourselves whenever we spend 5 to 10 minutes not doing anything.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the big challenge that I find, that I am someone who loves to tick stuff off a list, get to the end of the list and I go, oh, I should have made a longer list, rather than going, oh, brilliant, now I can practice this discipline of being still. And treating it like a spiritual discipline rather than treating it like laziness, because that's the irony of our technology. It's made things, in theory, the idea is it should have made our lives easier and given us more time to do stuff because that we want to do, because it's supposed to make things quicker. But actually, it's just meant we're expected to fit more things into the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think for me, it is this month I want to try that transition towards, actually, no, this is a discipline that I'm trying to work on.
And get away from the guilt of feeling awful about not doing things. I think saying no to things I find very difficult, because you always feel that you're accountable now, and you have to say why you're not doing something. And to say...
rather than just, I'm not doing anything. Because
I'm practicing waiting, so I'm not doing it.
I'm being still for a few hours that evening.
You could always say, I have something in my diary. You don't have to say what's in your diary.
Oh,
it's
it's
simply
genius.
That, But also, I think to recognise, certainly for me, the waiting and the stillness and the silence is also often a place of profound challenge. It's not sort of a comfort blanket, sort of wrapping around ourselves and feeling all snuggled. Sometimes it is that, because that's what Jesus wants us to know at that time. But there's also the time in the silence and the stillness where Jesus says to me, Mark, we need to look at this. And actually, Mark might not want to look at that then.
I don't know if any of you have tried this. Over Lent, I did try a discipline of sitting and just doing nothing except drinking a cup of tea for 45 minutes a day as a Lent discipline. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done at Lent. To just be completely still and just listen. And honestly, at first I was like, I'm going to do an hour. And then after the first couple of days, I'd quickly sliced it down to 45 minutes, because it is, you're right, it can be really uncomfortable. Yeah. But
also an opportunity to grow in all kinds of ways. I think sometimes the busyness that I generate is, on occasions, if I'm looking back, sometimes an opportunity to evade all other stuff that perhaps the Lord desperately wants me to slow down and have a good look at. So I think it is gift for me as I prepare to celebrate Christmas and gifts and what have you. I think stillness and silence and all of that's gift.
I think we can mistake the having of things all the time as the gift as well, can't we? I went on my honeymoon last year and we decided not to have Wi-Fi while we were away. And we met other guests who were staying where we were, and they were like, you're insane, you don't have Wi-Fi? Oh my gosh, how do you stay? We're in America. How do you stay in touch with people? And we were like, we've just told everyone we're not going to be in touch. We're just going to have this space. And we used our phones to take photos and things, and, we went into the jungle at one point. It was great. But you couldn't then immediately send that photo back to everybody at home and say, look what we've been doing. And oh my gosh, it felt amazing. And I felt like I was away for longer.
Yes.
And it was just such a lovely opportunity to have that space. I highly recommend it.
And
Get rid of your Wi-Fi. It did, and I came back and there was an awful lot of messages in my inbox, but I got through them in the end.
And Marie, I'm really interested in knowing a little bit more about how waiting shapes what you do at Catherine House, because it's a retreat centre. I'm wondering if that's something that people come to the centre needing. They need the time to wait and to reflect, and how that shapes your work there.
Yeah, we get it so little, don't we, in our daily lives, those periods of quiet, those periods of nothing. And in a sense, some of what's most valuable about what I offer is a little bit of nothing. The time that people spend on their own. People come on retreat, and I offer some thoughts, some ways of praying maybe, and then I'll give them up to the silence, and I'll say, I'm not leading the retreat. You're making the retreat, and the Spirit is leading the retreat. And then when we come to the end, I always give them a candle, we pass it around, and your job is to either share if you want to, or the rest of the group holds you in prayer while you're holding it. And it's always such a privilege to hear what the Spirit's managed to do with people in the time that they've given. It might only be a day, but the people respond with stories of healing. stories where they've come to terms with something that hurt them, stories where, you know, the Spirit has come and shown them a way forward. And that's always amazing when that happens.
Bishop Mark, do you get much opportunity to wait as a bishop
Yes.
in your vocation?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's important to make the time. You know, I think there's no end to the things of God. There's no end to the things that we could be about each and every day. But I think all of us, wherever we are in that journey of discipleship, of friendship with the Lord, we have to think, what's the priority for today? How are we going to walk with that 3 mile an hour God? And so I think we have to make an end sometimes. We have to draw a line in the sand. I have to say, for this hour, I'm going to be in my chapel and I am going to be still and silent. And yes, I could be doing zillions of other things, but I'm not, because I'm here. And I think that then begins to say, as with all relationships, what priority do we give those relationships? How do we make time for each other? How do we make time for the things that matter? How do we make time for God? And I think for me, part of that is about discipline, but also being very conscious, as Marie's just helpfully shared with us. We are in this together. We're not on our own. You know, that sense of when someone's holding the candle at the end of the day and everyone else in the room praying with them, and being very conscious as I sit in my little chapel of being caught up in that great offering of stillness, of waiting that is universal, that reaches from earth to heaven, and that we're caught up in the eternal offering of worship. And in the book of Revelation where it says, and there was silence in heaven, that silence also enfolds us here on earth, if we give it the chance.
I'm sort of getting the feeling from the conversation that, firstly, we're all probably doers and want to be doing things. And then also, secondly, that for both of you, you've really made an effort to make this a discipline, both whether it's like in your actual work where you're helping other people to enter that discipline of waiting, being patient and still, or whether it's something that has become necessary in order to be able to build your relationship with God and also to do your job. And I'm wondering whether you've had the experience of practicing that discipline making you better at being patient in other areas of your life. Because something that I've definitely found is that the times of my life where I am rushing around and not giving time to being still and being patient with God, I'm a lot less good at being patient with my fellow humans, and whether that's in the church or not. And I'm wondering whether you've noticed a correlation, or whether it's changed the way you're able to view and treat other people when you have these times of waiting and stillness that you work in.
Catherine House operates in the Ignatian tradition. So St Ignatius comes to us from 1556 with some quite modern wisdom. And he has this prayer he liked his followers to say at the end of the day, where they imagine scenes from their day and let that unfold in their mind. And notice, where were the strong feelings? Where did you see Christ in someone? Where did you miss the opportunity to see Christ in someone? What comes to the forefront when you look at your day with the Spirit? And when I'm teaching people to pray that way, I always say, I know that the Marie who spends time praying this is a nicer person than the Marie who does not have time.
And I'm wondering then, having that time is brilliant if you can get it, right? So if you can go to a retreat centre, or if you have the freedom to carve into your day an hour of praying or time to be still. So what would you say then to, the parent of 3 kids who is also working full time and is listening to this and going, I don't have time to be still. I'd love that. I'd love to be left alone for an hour. I'd probably fall asleep. How am I supposed to practice this discipline of being patient or waiting when I don't have the time? What would you say to them? What would you say would be ways they could incorporate this into their discipleship journey if they don't have those opportunities?
Yeah, I think for me, It's such a fascinating question, and it could be answered, I think, on so many levels. But for me, it's about integrity and about being who we really are and living into the fullness of who we are. I am not a contemplative monk or a vowed religious. I don't live in a religious community. I'm a jobbing bishop in the Church of England with busy days. We all have all kinds of things in our diaries. You know, one of the most amazingly contemplative prayers that I know is the mother of 3 young children. And she's taught me so much about contemplative prayer and about stillness at the heart of everything, while she lives in the midst of a chaos that I would just never, ever in a bazillion years cope with. And yet there's a stillness deep within her heart. And so I think we have to pray as we are. And not as someone else that we would like to be or imagine to be, or how things are going to be when things are a bit better, or when this changes or that changes.
We're not all going to be Instagrammable mindfulness people.
No. Pray as we are.
Thank goodness.
And I think that, you know, the opportunities, even if we live an incredibly busy life, as, you know, lots and lots of us do, where are those 3 or 4 minutes each day that we can carve out? And that offering to God, offered in love, he will take and use. And he will use it so, so wonderfully to draw us deeper and deeper into the reality of his love. But we have to make that offering. And it might mean locking yourself in the bathroom for 5 minutes away from everybody else. Or it might mean going and standing on the bus shelter and wait for a bus, or whatever else. How can you pray? Light a candle, look at a cross, look at something beautiful, the world around us. But it takes the determined will, which is the offering of love, for me.
Marie?
Ignatius actually prescribes the examen for busy people, his prayer at the end of the day. When he first sent his followers out to do things, they wrote back to him and sort of complaining, like, oh, you told us to set up schools, and you told us to advise kings, and you told us to do this, that and the other, but we don't have time to see all these offices. We don't have time to pray. It's the age-old cry. And he wrote back and said, well, if you don't have time for all the prayers, do this one. Do this review at the end of the day. And I know that, you know, sometimes I'm walking home from work at nearly 10 o'clock at night, because we do lots of evening things, and it's 20 minutes walk home, and sometimes that has to be my prayer time while I'm doing that. But yeah, that's his prescription for busyness.
I love that, a prescription for busyness. I think I need one of those. Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much for your contributions today. That was just really, I think mindful is the modern word for it, but I think that's a lot for people to go away and think about, and hopefully have a bit of space to think about as well. Hannah, what actions are we suggesting around the theme of waiting this month? And when I say actions, I mean slightly less active than some of the other things we may have suggested before.
Well, I think one of them will have to be trying out this Ignatian prayer review that we've just been discussing, and we'll have more details of that in the little newsletter, along with the other actions of how you can try and use that in your daily life. But there might be other things as well that you want to try to slow down this month, particularly in this very busy season. And that could be very simple. So some things you might want to do to try and practice patience, practice waiting in yourself, might be even stuff as simple as letting someone cut in front of you in the queue if they look like they're in a hurry, and what that might do to your sense of yourself and where your priorities are. Maybe it's walking more slowly so you're better able to take in what's happening around you. Or it could be more structured. So you could try taking up a daily prayer routine, whether it's using this Ignatian prayer, or you could use a daily prayer page on the Church of England website so you can join others in praying the same words every day. And maybe there are things that you've prayed for in the past but you've given up on because you didn't feel like you got an answer. And I wonder whether you could challenge yourself to take up the discipline of patiently praying for the same thing each day this Advent, and kind of leaning into that discipline of waiting, even if you don't know what the result will be. And as always, we'd love to hear your ideas for practicing waiting this month, especially if you try out something that you haven't done before.
Thank you for listening to More Than Sunday. We hope you have a blessed Advent season and a joyful Christmas. We'll be back in the new year to explore the theme of justice.